Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is Black Friday, November 24th, 2017. Greetings from Cambridge, Massachusetts, where this week I traveled 3 time zones to the west via Skype to Seattle for a conversation with Gabriella Page-Fort, whose leadership of Amazon Crossing from its launch 7 years ago has resulted in Amazon becoming by far the biggest publisher of translated literature in the U.S.
We can't speak for what any other publishers are doing or why, but we obviously see major opportunity in translation, and that is why we've had the opportunity to focus on it.
Also this week, we will look back at the Kindle's first 10 years from a design perspective, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my experience with Amazon Key, that way to have packages delivered inside from Amazon, and it's worked out pretty well. I've even got Darlene being a little more positive toward it. I'm sure everyone listening knows that today is Black Friday and Cyber Monday's coming and that Amazon is going to have fantastic deals. I'm not going to take a lot of time, or really any time in this episode, to talk about the specific deals. If you've been waiting to buy an Echo Show or one of the Kindles, the new Oasis is not on sale, but really pretty impressive deals are going to be coming for the next few days. So obviously this is a great time to shop at Amazon. I had always thought Black Friday was black because that's the day that most retailers went into the black, where their revenues caught up with their expenses. But Alexa's Daily Greeting had a different version.
Today is Black Friday. The name was coined by police officers in Philadelphia in the 1950s because of all the traffic and smog caused by shoppers. Despite the connotation, the phrase took off and became a household moniker by the mid-90s.
Interesting. In other news, I have a piece I'd like to recommend to you about the design evolution of the Kindle in the past decade. It appeared this week in TechCrunch, written by a Seattle freelancer named Devin Coldewey. Devin based his story on an interview with Chris Green, the Lab 126 design vice president, who helped to demo the first Kindle Oasis for me at a private session early last year in New York City with one other Amazon exec. I enjoyed meeting Chris. He is an engaging Brit with a passion for the dedicated e-reader. I didn't know, or maybe had forgotten, that Chris Green's first day at Amazon was November 19th, 2007. Here is his memory of that day. I walked into the office and everyone was going crazy. I thought that's what it was going to be like every day. Then the next morning I went in, they had sold all the Kindles in one day and everybody was panicking. So that was an interesting first 24 hours. This auspicious timing meant Chris would spend the next 10 years pursuing what he calls the gold standard, also known as paper. Everything we've done over 15 generations has been to reduce it to basically a piece of paper, Chris told TechCrunch. By the way, that count of the generations doesn't fit how the new Oasis is identified in Amazon's list of Kindles at the updates page, where you can make sure you have the latest firmware for your Amazon device, from Fire TV to Fire tablets to and Kindles. The Oasis there is listed as the 9th generation, so I'd like to find out how the 15th generation is arrived at in the story at TechCrunch. I've reached out to Devin Coldewey to see if he might be able to join us for next week's show, so maybe I'll have a chance to ask him that. There were some other interesting tidbits in that article, including a detail of the late great Kindle DX, the biggest Kindle of them all. Green said the first version of the DX had a fully quilted surface made of fabric. That turned out to be too expensive and it didn't wear well. As I remember the DX, the back did have sort of a soft, rubbery feel. It was easy on the hands, so that quilted design did make it to the final product, but in a more affordable and sustainable way. Some of the most important design changes to the Kindle over the past decade have arisen, as you can imagine, from Amazon's close observation of how customers use the device for reading. Green said, "We had a really cool reading lab in our building where we would watch people read and see how quickly people's eyes got bored as they scanned a line of text." He added, "When people read, they fidget like crazy. It's uncomfortable to watch." I like that little detail. I picture a time-lapse photography of me reading in a chair and how much fidgeting there is, probably a lot. Apparently, that level of close observation led to switching the Kindle body from white to off black or graphite with the Kindle 3. That was also called the Kindle keyboard. I remember the moment when Amazon's Jay Marine pulled a Kindle 3 out of his sports coat pocket with a flourish for a demo in Boston. I thought it looked fantastic. Chris Green explained that the reason for shifting to a graphite-colored body was to increase the contrast ratio to make the e-ink screen look whiter. We wanted the black text to pop more on the display, he said. I have to say I part company with the TechCrunch writer in his description of the Kindle Touch. He wrote, "It seems to me to have lost something of its soul with this change." Coldewey wrote, "The Kindle 4 and its successors reminded me more of budget tablets of years past rather than a brand new device." The reason I don't agree has to do with trying to approach that gold standard of paper. You can write with pencil or pen on a paper page, or you can highlight with a marker, but there's no keyboard. So I think the Touch was a significant design improvement, and it makes sense to me that Amazon never went back to a physical keyboard after the voyage. The TechCrunch piece revealed something I hadn't known before about the screen color of various Kindle generations. Green told the writer that there are 3 different temperatures for white LEDs, warm, blue, and neutral. By mixing those bins, he explained, you get a nice blend. So we've played with those blends to get where we are now, but there's always room for improvement. The reason that caught my eye is that, as I think I mentioned last week, I noticed that my new Kindle Oasis seems to have a more sepia-like color to it than the previous one, which seems more black and white. I noticed that when I was reading them side by side in the dark in bed. I would be curious if you have noticed this subtle shift. If you are now using one of the new Oasis Kindles, you can drop me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com with your observation. It's really tough to make comparisons between e-ink screens. I've learned that in the past. I sometimes think it's pretty much in the eye of the beholder. Green said he was surprised that customers weren't wild about the page press feature of the Voyage, which I remember thinking was a significant improvement over the Paperwhite, where you had to tap on the screen to advance the page. I liked keeping my thumb off the screen, and I liked the silent action of page press, the better for not waking Darlene up in bed while I was reading. The page-turn buttons on the Voyage were expensive and very cool, Green told TechCrunch, but there's something about the button snap that's very satisfying. That's why the Oasis switched to the more traditional next and previous buttons, and I think that was a good move. So, with the Oasis, the design team made a bold move away from a symmetrical Kindle. As always, the prompt for that change came from watching how customers preferred holding the Kindle in one hand. There was no specific reference to the basic Kindle in this story, normally priced at $80, but now available as part of Black Friday and Cyber Monday for just $50. I thought there might be an anniversary reduction in the normal price of that basic Kindle to like $40 for November 19th, but that didn't happen. As for what's next, the Lab 126 Design VP made it clear he is still pursuing that gold standard of paper. Quote, "You know where we're going, and we're getting really close to it," he told Coldewey. Green said he has had both versions of the Oasis, and, quote, "the next one is going to be even better." If paper is the gold standard and they're still using that idea, my guess is that a new Oasis, or maybe a Kindle with a new name next year, is going to be thinner and lighter. Cheaper is always nice, too. I want to thank Guven Vidovine for emailing me the link to the TechCrunch retrospective, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading. The other news item I want to mention is my experience with the Amazon Key. No rogue drivers have tapped in code to bypass the cloud cam that I use to watch the inside of the front door during deliveries. Instead, the deliveries have been quick and discreet, the door opening just enough for an unseen hand to drop the package on the floor and then close and lock the door faster than a speeding Yorkie. I was at a restaurant with Darlene, my daughter Rue, and my young grandsons when the first in-home delivery took place. I didn't get a notification in time to watch it as it happened, but shortly afterward I noticed an alert, and so I was able to play the video on my iPhone 10. And I was impressed with how fast it happened, and it was pretty cool to have a video of the delivery. Listener Jim Wellman emailed me a video of one of his first Amazon Key in-home deliveries. It was pretty funny because in his case it featured a real dog, at least 10 times the size of the Yorkie Claire, strolling toward the door with her tail wagging, and she had heard a gentle tap on the door. The unseen delivery person drops the package and has a friendly greeting for Lily before closing the door and locking it. Jim said he received a couple of heads-up notices before his delivery. I haven't been able to find a setting so that that happens on mine. I called Amazon Key Tech Support, and they suggested reinstalling the app. I did that. It doesn't seem to have made a difference. It may be that the iPhone 10 has got a compatibility issue with the Amazon Key app. I have more in-home deliveries coming on Sunday, a book for my sister's partner for Christmas, and an adapter to connect my Blue Yeti microphone to the Type-C USB port on my MacBook Pro. So that's going to give me a chance to see if some advanced notifications arrive. I'd like to be able to tune in for the live viewing of the actual delivery of the package, whether I'm upstairs here in my workroom or on an RTD bus in Denver. Darlene has been a skeptic, I mentioned last week, but she has been impressed at how quick and discreet the deliveries have been. She was also reading today on a community mail list we get about packages that have begun disappearing from the outside of people's doors. Not a lot, but enough to make you think it's pretty nice to have the packages placed inside. I'm also glad to see that in-home delivery is now available just as fast here in Cambridge as regular delivery, free with 2-day Prime delivery. They're rolling out this new service, Amazon Key, in just a few cities, I think about 5 cities across the country, including Boston, so I feel fortunate that I've had a chance to try it. If you've tried it, I'd love to hear about your experience, and if you want to send me a video of a delivery at your front door, I'd like to see that as well. You can email them to me at podchronicles@gmail.com. I've got some tech tips for you this week. The first comes from listener Bob Lee, who writes, "Hi Len, I don't remember if you mentioned this on the podcast, but I noticed recently that my Kindle Fire HD8 7th generation added a page curl while reading books. I usually tap the screen and it looks like a dark vertical wave quickly passes from right to left, so I decided to swipe slowly instead. It not only curls the page, but if you stop midway and move your finger up and down, you can twist the page being turned. And all the text is on it backwards, as if you're seeing through the back of the page at what is on the front. Wow," Bob continues, "some developers spent a lot of time getting this just right. It's why I love Amazon devices." I hadn't spotted this because I have had my Fire HD8 and also the 10 settings set for no page curls. So I just made that page today, and from within a book about Tai Chi, the way I did it is I tapped on the page, a page of the book, and that brought up the page flip view. Then I tapped on the 3 dots at the upper right to see additional settings. I then tapped on page curl, turning the button on or so that it looked gold or yellow. So now when I slowly drag the page from right to left, as Bob says, it looks like a real page with the back shadowed and the amazing ability to bend the page up or down a little. The ability to see the words on the page show through the imaginary page so they appear in mirror reversal. It's cool, but I don't think it's maybe the right choice from a design standpoint if the goal is to mimic a real book. I don't know how you would do that, but the next design challenge might be to show the next page on the back of the one you're turning in non-reverse type. That's the way it really looks in a book. And then maybe the page coming up would be blank, and then all of a sudden when you've completed the page turn, the words would appear on that page. Obviously, this would be tricky business, but if they're going to play around with this in such detail, I think they might not want to have a page look like the words are bleeding through from the front to the back of the page, because that never happens in any book I read. In any event, I agree with Bob that this is an impressive little advance for the Fire Tablet Kindle apps. It's also an instance where the Fire Kindle Reader has something not yet available on the Kindle apps for iOS and Android. So bravo, Fire Team. The next tech tip comes via Twitter from longtime listener Norm Gregory in Seattle. You may remember that in September I mentioned a dispute between Amazon and Google that had resulted in the removal of YouTube videos from the Echo Show. Google said the removal was related to a terms of service violation by Amazon that caused, quote, a broken user experience. The problem was YouTube videos, which were a big part of Amazon's touting of the show, as in calling up a video and how to do sponge painting on a wall for your granddaughter showed up in a non-standard display on the show. You'll find details of the new display for YouTube videos on the show in an article at VoiceBot by Brett Kinsella. I'll have a link to it in the show notes at thekindlechronicles.com. Kinsella quotes an Amazon spokesman as saying, "We're excited to offer customers the capability to watch even more video content from sources such as Vimeo, YouTube, and Daily Motion on Echo Show. More video sources will be added over time." I hadn't relied on my Echo Show for videos before the kerfuffle with Google and YouTube, but I'm glad the problem has been solved. I like the show mainly as a frictionless way to drop in on my parents in their kitchen. But, if you were, say, a fan of the Ohio Buckeyes, to pick a random example, you might like to take a break from your work, and you might do something like this. Alexa, show me a video of the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Here's what I found.
So now she's pulled up on the screen a number of videos that look interesting about the Ohio State Buckeyes, and the one I think is of most interest is number 11. So we'll do this. Alexa, play number 11. And now what's going to come up on the screen is a YouTube page that has this video, and it's going to start playing. So what we're going to hear here is somebody named Teddy Covers on the Sports BIT show.
Ohio State and Michigan. Buckeyes -12 on the road in Ann Arbor. Total 50.5. Look headline over the summer, Ohio State -7.
Okay, so if you're a Buckeyes fan, I bet you know exactly what he's talking about, and it sounds like there's a big game ahead. And now that Google and Amazon have solved their problem, you'll be able to watch the clips and get ready for it with your Echo Show. The last tech tip relates to what I talked about last week about using that Garmin Speak in the car. I did find a listener who wanted that for $50. I hope it's arrived in Tennessee by now. Eddie Michael wrote, "Hey Len, listen to your review of the Alexa-enabled device in the car. Thanks for trying. I put my Dot in my car and I have enjoyed it." He included a link to a brief YouTube video that shows his setup, and I'll include that in the show notes. He continued, "Nothing glamorous as you can see. The car is a 2006 Highlander hybrid and did not have Bluetooth connection. The Dot plugs into my USB power adapter. I connected the Wi-Fi to either my hotspot or tether it to my iPhone. Different services on each depending on where I travel. As I mentioned, the car did not have Bluetooth, but I found a neat device which allows Bluetooth through my iPod cable, a Cool Stream Duo. I'll link to that in the show notes. Cheap, and I just connected to the iPod cable in the dash. The Dot connects to it just fine. The Dot is permanent in my car now. There is a battery adapter at Best Buy for the Dot, and I'm probably going to add that next as the Dot turns off when I turn off the ignition. Since most newer cars probably have built-in Bluetooth and perhaps Wi-Fi, the connection should be pretty simple. Happy holidays, Eddie Michael." Thanks, Eddie. That's a clever setup to bring Alexa with you on the road. I feel confident that she's going to be built into cars in the not-too-distant future. Time now for the interview. Gabriella Page-Fort is editorial director of Amazon Crossing, the imprint of Amazon Publishing that in the past 7 years under her leadership has become the biggest publisher of translated books in the U.S. market. It's quite an accomplishment for Amazon and for this 2003 NYU graduate in Romance Languages and Creative Writing. I spoke with Gabriella by Skype between Cambridge, Mass. And Seattle on Tuesday, November 21st. I began by asking her to recall exactly why Amazon created a translations imprint back in 2010.
When we got started, we were really excited by the fact that it would be a significant contribution to the publishing community to focus on translations. We were really interested in the 3% blog that Chad Post at Open Letter Books at the University of Rochester maintains. This is focused on fiction and poetry and translation, and it supports the premise that fewer than 3% of books published in the United States each year are works in translation. So there's lots of room to grow. And in the 7 years that we've been focused in this space, we've become the largest publisher of translated literature in the U.S. according to that database. And there's been an incredible response from readers. So I think one of the assumptions behind that 3% statistic is that readers don't want translations, and I think what we've seen absolutely belies that assumption. For example, we have talked about, I think we've spoken together before about German author Oliver Putsch. His Hangman's Daughter series of historical thrillers, which were translated by Lee Shadane, who passed this year, may he rest in peace, has sold more than 1 million copies. And books in the series have hit the USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller lists. And we've reached 500,000 readers with the English translation of Petra Durst Benning's series, The Glassblower Trilogy, which was translated by Samuel Wilcox and Edwin Miles. Both of those series are historical. Both come from Germany, but I don't know that either of those details has anything to do with why either of them was successful. They were successful because they're really memorable, great reads. And what we've seen with those numbers and with the success in terms of what readers are saying about those books is that they just love them. I don't know that they're necessarily even reaching readers who are shopping for books in translation. So beyond the success of finding readers who would buy a historical thriller regardless of where it was written, we've also had the pleasure of focusing on award-winning authors from many different countries and languages, which I think is in many ways, could be the same kind of publishing strategy as being focused on readers, but it is in some ways what makes our list so diverse, because we do have this balance of different genres and different audiences for the books that we're publishing. So we've had the pleasure of working with award-winning authors from all over the world, including recent success by Shion Miura, The Great Passage, which won the Japanese Bookseller Award, and was brilliantly translated by Juliet Winters Carpenter, who's an award-winning translator from Japanese. We've recently published another book that I think from a translation perspective is sort of a feat of translation called The Grey House by Mariam Petrosian, and that was translated by, what is Yuri's last name? I don't remember Yuri's last name off the top of my head.
Yuri's last name is Machkasov, and you'll find all of the books that Gabriella mentions in the interview in the show notes, along with links so that you'll find them easily. She had tremendous recall of all these books, and Maggie Savone from Amazon Publishing helpfully sent me links to them all, so saved me some time here on Thanksgiving to get this ready for you. Appreciate that, Maggie. We will now return to the interview.
We really have this diversity that comes from focusing not only on one genre or another, but rather on thinking about what readers are reading and bringing new cultures and unique viewpoints into all of those different genres and styles from around the world.
What languages were you translating from into English at the start?
From the start, we were focused on diversity. So the mission to increase the number of books published in translation and the diversity of that list of books has always been the mission.
You're not translating into any languages other than English, is that right?
We've been translating titles from English into German since July of 2012. And then in February 2015, we started translating English titles into French. And soon thereafter, in November 2015, we started translating English titles into Italian. And in December 2015, we launched in Spain, translating English titles into Spanish. And all of those imprints globally now actually are publishing books from various languages in translation in their local language. But the global nature of our business actually allows us to find a wide variety of great stories from around the world to present to new readers, and also to offer the opportunity for authors to see their works translated in a variety of language by one publishing team that can represent their author brand globally.
How many books have you translated so far since the beginning?
Into English, we've published more than 300 books from 36 countries in 21 languages.
That's amazing. A couple of years ago, when I talked with Chad, he was really highlighting the fact that Amazon Crossing had become the largest translator of books into English. And I found myself, how come Random House, how come the other, the big five publishers haven't been doing that? And also, how come mainly translations before Amazon Crossing were all literary? They're all more high literature than genre or popular. It sort of surprised me that someone hadn't done this before you started doing it.
Most ideas seem pretty obvious when they turn out to be good ones. I think that that question has varied so much through history too. Think about the classics. I mean, so many of the books that everyone reads are translations. So I don't know that that's been true of the publishing industry for all time.
Right.
But we can't speak for what any other publishers are doing or why, but we obviously see major opportunity in translation, and that is why we've had the opportunity to focus on it.
Yeah. And the response, as you say, some of these books have sold 1 million copies and more. What have you learned about your customers' appetite for this kind of work in the 7 years that you didn't know when you started out? You must have had some hypotheses about what was going to be successful, but with these many books actually out there, have you refined your sense of what people are looking for?
It's a good question. These things move quickly, so I think that the most helpful thing editorially for my team has always been to focus on recent successes and to try to understand what's special about them. I think that generalizing that one genre sells better than another is tempting, but what you actually see when you study the data is that a lot of different books are published in categories that are seen as popular categories, and some of them are really successful and some of them are not. So it's usually more about the quality of the book. But some recent examples that we've been citing in talking to agents and publishers recently, because they've been exciting recent successes for us that show maybe something directional about what readers are most excited about. Mark Levy is one of the most famous authors writing in French, and his novel P.S. from Paris, translated by Sam Taylor, just came out. It's a delightful romantic comedy, and it's doing incredibly well in terms of readership and also in terms of reviews. We mentioned already Petra Durst-Benning's successes, but her sweeping historical novels feature women defying convention and thriving, and they're wonderful, and they're incredibly memorable. And we've just launched a new series with a novel called The Seed Woman, translated by Edwin Miles. We've seen success in historical fiction with other authors as well. Mina Bates, I think Baites might be how you say that last name, though. She's German. Translated by Alison Leyland. Her book, The Silver Music Box, is a really moving World War II family drama. And one of the biggest bestsellers from Greece ever, The House by the River, which is by the author Lena Manta, is our very first translation from Greek. And actually, we discovered this book through our translation submissions website. And that novel, translated by Gail Holst-Warhoft, just came out and is doing very, very well. Readers are in love. Also discovered through the submissions website was The Honest Spy, which is a totally different genre. This is an espionage thriller. And the translator, actually, Steve Anderson, submitted that recommendation through the online submission website. And the author, Andreas Collender, has been very excited about our results so far, and so have readers. And we're very excited also to focus on nonfiction. We've tried a couple of tests in the past in nonfiction, but we haven't done much of it. And on our forward list, we have some really exciting new releases that we're hoping will prove that genre's potential in translation. One of them is A River in Darkness, One Man's Escape from North Korea by Masaji Ishikawa, which is a book that is extremely hard to use exclamation points when you're talking about, because it is so very serious and intense and unforgettable. The story is personal, and it is very much a look right into the eyes of a regular person in North Korea and what life has been for that person. And then later on, in the beginning of 2018, we have a very different kind of nonfiction release with An American Princess by Anit Vanderjeel, translated by Michelle Hutchinson. And this is a beautiful sort of rags to riches story about a Dutch woman who comes to the U.S. and basically becomes a version of royalty herself. So the categories that we request submissions in are fantasy, historical fiction, literary fiction, memoir, mystery, thriller, and suspense, romance, science fiction, women's fiction, which is a loaded name, but it exists as a category, so we use it, and young adult fiction. So we're really looking broadly, and then making decisions based on the data we're seeing as it's coming across.
Yeah. Well, now you mentioned the website, and a little over a month ago, you announced that it was navigable in 14 languages, meaning that if someone was wanting to submit something, but it wasn't so easy for them to do it in English, they might find their own language. I think you mentioned a couple of books have come since then, but has that turned out to be a pretty powerful tool to increase the number of quality submissions?
Absolutely. We've seen an increase in the number and the diversity of submissions since the announcement. And we've also seen an increase in the number of applications from translators looking to work with us. Specifically, Arabic is a language that's somewhat unreachable from the community that we have built so far, and we've received a number of extremely interesting Arabic submissions since localizing into the Arabic language. We're reviewing those now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how the submissions process works, both from the point of view of a translator or an author.
So at Amazon Crossings editors review all the submissions to the website. We actually sit together every week and look at them together. And the team here reads French, Spanish, German, Italian, Swedish, Norwegian, Mandarin, and Danish. And for languages beyond that group, we work with trusted translators to review submissions. While the website will be displayed in English when you first land there, you can select your preferred language by clicking on a globe icon. And I think it's a pretty intuitive experience for the person putting through the submission. It's a limited amount of information that we're asking for in the form itself. And what we do once we receive that information is parse it with the help of translators, or if we can read the language ourselves, and figure out, where is there something hot, where is there something interesting for us, and then we reach out to the person who submitted that recommendation and follow up to get more information. So sometimes the person who has made the recommendation is the author or is a translator or is the agent and has something directly associated with the book and can actually give us everything we need and send us the manuscript and media reviews and recommendations in more detail. But sometimes the book will be recommended by a reader. And so that first contact is often us finding out, what is the person's place from which they're recommending this book, and how can we learn from them what our next step would be. So it's really very different from the submissions that we receive from agents and publishers we've worked with in the past, because those come with a certain amount of formality in the proposal. And in this case, we're actually doing a lot more talking to new people and reaching out and finding out more about why this book and what is it about this book that compelled you to fill out the form. Mm-hmm. So the process is really very similar from there to how we would review a submission that came to us directly from an agent. But it really opens the door to recommendations beyond our existing community. And, just think about how many great books there are written in the French language. France, of course, is part of the source of those incredible books written in the French language. But it's not the only source. So we have strong insight into what's being read in France, but what about the rest of the world that writes in French? And how do we better reach those books? By localizing the website into French, we are making it possible for anyone sitting anywhere in the world to speak to us in that language and give us the pitch that they might not otherwise be invited to offer.
Right, because the language sort of circles the globe. You could be coming from Africa or other places where people speak French.
Exactly. And, the languages that we focused on this round for our expansion, we were really hoping to reach sort of beyond the known world literature in that language. Arabic, obviously, is one of the most spoken languages in the world, but it's also one of the least localized communities. It's very hard to go to one book fair and meet all the people you need to know in order to publish books in translation from Arabic. So what we are receiving in these submissions that come through the website is very exciting to us. The gems that we are able to discover this way are really expanding our view of the literature of the world.
Normally, when people are trying to get books published in English, the English writers, it's got to be less than 1% of books submitted either to agents or publishers ever get printed. What kind of a percent are you able to actually publish from the submissions that you're getting?
I don't really know how to deduce that question, because you think about it, and so many of the filters that we use to go through whether or not this book or that book are at the highest of levels. So there isn't a magic number. It really is, where did we get excited, and then where did we follow that up? Oftentimes, the book that was submitted by the agent isn't the right book, but we then develop a relationship, and we go on to find the right book later on. So trying to simplify, how many out of the books that we've seen do we go forward with? It's kind of a challenging thing to simplify. But I would say that the goal is not just to publish as much as we possibly can, but rather to find the best possible books. So the relationships that come out of this at this point of introduction are a big part of that mission. And then the details of what we discover once we're looking through those submissions, it's different every time. So to try to say, there could be a day where we receive a batch of submissions that are not on the mark of what we're looking for, and the very next day we'll receive a host of books that stand out immediately as being worthy of a closer look, like the 3 books that we've actually published so far that came from this source. The House by the River, which I mentioned, The Judgment of Richard Richter by Igor Stix, translated by Ellen Elias Bursack. And that was actually an interesting use case because that book was recommended to us by a human rights professor at Columbia University. And she was aware of the author and aware of the book, but couldn't read it, and was really interested in considering it as a book to teach on her course because she thought that it was actually more enlightening about what happened after the Serbo-Croatian War than anything else that she could find. And so that was really exciting for us, and that book has been published recently and has been successful. But the submissions that we're receiving from any source are really diverse, and what we're always trying to do is figure out that kernel of unique, memorable attachment that we know that we could display to a potential reader and have them realize that this is the thing for them.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many people are reading your books as ebooks for Kindle or other e-readers versus print? I suspect it might vary by genre as it does in other publishing, but is it at least half or digital, or what would be your guess?
We have a very exciting digital publication. From the perspective of where we've seen our biggest successes, we've been very excited about the Kindle channel as a path for us. We have great marketing opportunities that we can offer to authors, that many of them emphasize Kindle editions. But of course, we are format agnostic. I don't know if that comes up often on Kindle Chronicles, but I think it probably does.
Yes.
We really believe that if you like a book and you want to read it, you should be able to listen to it in an audio format, maybe physical audio, maybe digital audio, your choice. You should be able to read it on any device that you're using. You should be able to have a print copy. You should be able to buy print copies for your friends, because the ultimate dream is that a person falls in love with a book and buys 6 of them to give away at Christmas. I think that happens to me as a reader all the time. So I think from a practical perspective, it definitely varies not only by genre, but also by, what is the path towards success for that book. Some books really make their mark in bookshops, and some books really make their mark through digital, and then over time, any book that's successful ends up being successful across all formats.
I've been impressed by some of the Kindle in Motion books, the Patricia Cornwell and some of the others. Have any of your Amazon Crossing books experimented with the capabilities of that format?
You'll have to stay tuned on that one.
Aha! Don't be afraid to break any news here. You heard it first on the Kindle Chronicles podcast.
Yeah, I think you'll have to stay tuned for that one, and Maggie and I will follow up with you sooner than later.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd be very interested, because that'd be a fascinating...
I love those features. Just my own, as a reader, The Secret Garden knocked my socks off. It's one of my favorite books.
Well, and they're subtle, it's not just dropping a video in.
Yeah, and I didn't think that they could make me like The Secret Garden more, but they have.
That's great. I was going to ask you about some translations that you've been working on, but I think you've managed to list more exciting books in 24 minutes than anybody I've had on the show so far.
Can you tell that's my favorite part?
And you have pronounced a lot of challenging names, I assume pretty accurately, so bravo for putting a lot of good content in front of it. And I'll have links to all these books in the show notes, so when people follow up, they can find something they might want to read. Well, I'm always interested in the scale of initiatives by Amazon, and I know that there's always, not information that can be put out, but can you say how many employees are on the team now, or give any other indications of the scale of what you're doing now on something that's started from scratch 7 years ago? Those of you who have listened to a lot of my interviews with folks at Amazon probably wonder why I even ask a question like this. The chances of getting a direct answer as to how many people are working at a part of Amazon or what kind of growth it's had are quite low. But I always figure if you ask, you might get some interesting information, or at least get to learn how different members of the Amazon team respond when someone asks them a question that they can't answer. Here's a fairly graceful example by Gabriella.
We have a great team of editors in Seattle, and we have the support of Amazon's Publishing's marketing, publicity, production, design, and sales departments. So we share those resources. We made a really exciting hiring announcement this summer. We hired Liza Darnton as senior editor, and she worked at Penguin Press in the past under Ann Godoff and has had an incredible career. And we're so excited that she's joined the family.
Is she any relation to Robert Darnton? He did the Digital Library of America. He was at Harvard. I talked to him a few times. Unusual name. I wonder if it's if she's related.
She has a very literary family, and I'm not actually 100% certain what her father is known for, or whether that is her father or not. That's funny that I don't know that off the top of my head. I need to spend more time having meals with Liza.
Maggie followed up later, and it turns out that Robert Darnton is an uncle of Liza Darnton, who was recently hired by Amazon Crossing. Yeah, that's a good hire. Talk about you got an award from Publishers Weekly. You were the Star Watch Superstar. What were they seeing in you, and what was the impact of getting that honor? I think, was that at the Frankfurt Book Fair or just leading up to it?
It was just before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it actually meant that I had a really beautiful experience of the Frankfurt Book Fair this year that was quite different from my experience in the past, because I was part of this delegation of young publishers from around the world who had won local honors similar to the honor that I was awarded with. So the Publishers Weekly Star Watch Award was kind of a surprise for me. I was very moved to learn that Maggie and my associate publisher, Galen Maynard, had nominated me. And I certainly didn't expect that the work that I was doing was in any way remarkable for such singling out. So I was very surprised and very moved when it was announced that I was the winner. And the context of the announcement was really focused on the work that Amazon Crossing has made as its mission from the beginning. And I've been working on the Amazon Crossing imprint since 2010 when we launched. So in many ways, I am so excited whenever anything happens to recognize Amazon Crossing's efforts, because I have quite a lot invested there personally. But this was the first time where I was personally honored or singled out for that effort that I had put in that was so close to my heart. So it was really very exciting to see that the publishing community at large, as represented by the Publishers Weekly magazine, which is our official trade rag of the publishing industry in the U.S., had recognized and specifically singled out the work of Amazon Crossing and my work contributing therein as something important in the industry and important to the community and worthy of note. And I couldn't believe at the party that was held where I had the pleasure of giving a short speech. The room was amazing. I think everyone in that room was really doing unbelievably interesting work. And one of the magical things about publishing is that you get together with other people who work in this industry, and immediately we share a common bond. This passion for bringing books to readers is not unique, and it is really wonderful to stand in a room full of people who are putting everything on the line toward that effort every day, and who are excited to hear about the work that we're doing to bring more diversity to the literature through translation. We got a really positive response.
I have been speaking with Gabriella Page-Fort, Editorial Director of Amazon Crossing. Thanks very much, Gabriella.
Thank you, Len.
In content, listener Karen Hagland today emailed me a message asking for recommendations for 2-year-old books. That's after I talked about my grandson Ryan exclaiming book when we were babysitting. I reached out to my daughter Rue, Ryan's mother, and she recommended 2 titles. I'll have links to them in the show notes. One is Little Blue Truck by Alice Schlertle, Schertle, illustrated by Jill McElmurray, and the other is The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. A couple of good books recommended by Ryan's mother. That's it for this week. I don't know who my guest will be next week, but I have a couple of ideas, including that writer from TechCrunch. I hope you will find some great deals as the shopping season enters full swing, and that you'll consider starting your Amazon shopping by clicking on the ad that you will find in the upper right corner at thekindlechronicles.com. That's much appreciated. It's also a good time to leave a review at iTunes if you like the show. That helps other people find it. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.